I'm Sharon, she's Ginevra. We both have personal and professional expertise with fibromyalgia, and today we're super excited to have a guest. Um, we are joined by Seth Lederman, who is the founder and CEO of Tonix, the company that may just have the next FDA-approved drug for fibromyalgia.
And Seth Lederman is a physician, scientist, and entrepreneur, and the founder of Tonix. He earned his MD from Columbia University's College of Physicians and Surgeons. Prior to becoming a biopharma entrepreneur, he was an associate professor at Columbia University for 2 decades and directed basic science research in molecular immunology, infectious disease, and the development of therapeutics for autoimmune diseases. We are super excited to have you here. Tell us about Tonix.
First of all, thank you both very much for having me on, and thank you for doing the show. Tonix was founded to work on fibromyalgia, and it's about 15 years old, and I've been working in fibromyalgia for one way or another for more than 25 years.
Wow.
Tonix was started to develop the medicine that we now call TNX-102 SL. And as you mentioned, it is on a path for a decision from FDA on approval, which is the goal date that FDA has set is August 15th of this year. So only about 4 months away. We are very excited. It's been a long road, and we are very excited to be potentially bringing forward the first new drug in more than 15 years.
That is super exciting. Wow, between the three of us, we have like 80 plus years of experience in this space. We all started around the same time. So I am so excited that you've been out there doing this work. And when we were just chatting, getting ready for the show to start, you were talking about how, fibromyalgia needs to get more attention, and that it's been a challenge for all of us working in this space to get the support we need for the 10 million plus people who live just in the United States, let alone around the world with fibromyalgia. So I'm really curious, what sparked your interest to, research and work on fibromyalgia?
Well, when I was at Columbia, I trained in rheumatology, and I was an attending physician in the rheumatology clinic at Columbia for a number of years. And my impression was that once I understood what fibromyalgia was, I felt that a large number of patients that I was seeing were suffering from it. And I think that made a big impression on me. I like to work on important problems. I also like to work on common problems. Another thing that's really intrigued me is chronic disease or chronic illness. So all of those things really attracted me to fibromyalgia. The other thing about fibromyalgia is that I think that in order to work on it as a scientist, you have to be comfortable with abstract ideas, because it's all about pain, fatigue, and sleep. And those are all subjective reports by the patient. And many drug companies, doctors, other people are not comfortable with these concepts. But I really believe in the patient. I believe in listening to the patient. I believe that you can really learn a lot by shared experience, by the way that humans communicate their shared experience. And I think that when I started in this, as I said, more than 25 years ago, it really was an abstract problem, but now it's become more and more real. I mean, the brain imaging studies by Dan Claw and his group, Irene Tracy, her group, I mean, they've really made this into a real thing. So they've dispelled this notion that the pain, is imaginary, which was, a huge uphill battle. But in my own tiny way, I feel like I've contributed to the understanding of fibromyalgia, the recognition of it. And, there's been an army of people who are involved, and I've played a minuscule, probably insignificant role up till now. but I think that the approvals of Lyrica, Cymbalta, and Savella were huge watermarks. From a regulatory point of view, that endpoints were recognized, a clinical development pathway was devised, and now that we have these three drugs. But I think that, to the extent that we're hoping to contribute with a new drug, we really stand on the shoulders of all the people that have worked before us and brought us to this point.
You said that so beautifully. And I often say, I think at this point, most doctors agree that fibromyalgia is real. And that's progress. That's a lot better than when Sharon and I were diagnosed about 20 plus years ago. But doctors now don't really know what to do about it, other than, there are those FDA approved drugs that you mentioned. But, the last one that was approved was 2009. There hasn't been anything new since then. And so that's where what Tonix is working on is so exciting, because it's bringing scientific interest back into fibromyalgia, which is exactly what we need to really get to the next level. So thank you so much, just personally, really, for doing the work that you have.
Well, it's my pleasure. I really love the community, and it would be I would be so pleased if my drug, brought relief to people. But I think that one of the things that has scared drug companies and and others from developing treatments for fibromyalgia is it is a very hard area to work in. And we, at our company, we have done 3 phase 3 trials at the current dose, the dose for which we're seeking approval. But before we did that, we did 2 large studies, a phase 2 and a phase 3 at a lower dose, that were on the verge of being successful, but didn't quite make it. And it just shows the difficulty of working in an area where there, in my opinion, there's really no animal model for fibromyalgia. So, we had to go and even do dose finding in humans. It was, we've spent many hundreds of millions of dollars on our program over 15 years. And, we're delighted that we were able to get to the end. But one of the other things, we all struggle with the idea that fibromyalgia may not get enough recognition. But on the other hand, when I started, when you all started, there 2 very important things have happened in addition to the brain imaging. One is that, when we started, people really didn't know what to call the pain of fibromyalgia.
Mm-hmm.
And now, just since 2014, the International Association for the Study of Pain has, recognized nociplastic pain as the 3rd type of pain. And whereas fibromyalgia was not included in a lot of pain meetings, now I was very pleased that the plenary lecture at the last international, IASP meeting was about nociplastic pain, for which most people recognize fibromyalgia as the prototype. So I think that scientific recognition has been huge. Another very important recognition and change is that, when we all started, so to speak, in our different respective roles, but when we all started, fibromyalgia was considered a diagnosis of exclusion.
Mm-hmm.
And that notion was dispelled maybe 15 years ago. But now there's even been a further evolution. And I actually was at the AAPM meeting last week, 10 days ago or so, in Austin, Texas. And Andrea Chadwick from University of Kansas had a really wonderful description. She says she thinks of it as fibromyalgia, and meaning that it's often the case that fibromyalgia is diagnosed in the context of other conditions. So we've come a long way from diagnosis of exclusion to something that can be diagnosed affirmatively, to that, the recognition by experts like Dr. Chadwick that it's often the case that people have comorbid conditions, and that trained doctors should be comfortable making the diagnosis of fibromyalgia in the context of potentially other comorbid conditions. And one of those is long COVID, that in June of 2024, the National Academies of Science, Medicine, Engineering, in their definition of long COVID, concluded that fibromyalgia was a, quote, diagnosable condition, unquote, in long COVID. So I think that this recognition of the brain imaging, the recognition of nociplastic pain, and now the understanding that fibromyalgia, can be comorbid and, maybe even commonly comorbid with other conditions, have really changed the understanding of fibromyalgia.
It's absolutely changed the landscape. And the other thing that we are realizing is that those comorbid conditions also need to be treated. It's very challenging to get improvement in fibromyalgia symptoms if there are other kind of untreated, undiagnosed, whether it's pain or other kind of immunologic conditions. So I think that recognition is absolutely making a difference. The other thing that's making a difference is I think people are looking at fibromyalgia as more than just pain. They're really looking at, sleep disturbance and fatigue and brain fog, and some of those actually can be some of the most debilitating symptoms of fibromyalgia. So that's where I think the medication that Tonix is working on, I think you have some, it's shown some benefit in kind of bigger than just pain management. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So first of all, I am if anything, a disciple of Dr. Harvey Moldavsky.
Oh, yes. I am as well.
Okay.
Guru.
It's now 50 years ago in 1975 that he made the audacious assertion that fibromyalgia may primarily be a sleep disorder. And Harvey Moldavsky has made so many other contributions to fibromyalgia. I can't even enumerate them all here, but this is what I'm focusing on. But and that idea was out there, and but it turned out that not every way to address the sleep disorder was even. So, for example, he did a study on the Ambien is the brand name of sleep drug, and found that didn't help. But he also did a study on sodium oxybate and found that it did help. And then the company that was the sponsor of sodium oxybate met with FDA and was dissuaded from continuing development of that drug because of its risk of diversion. So that never became a therapy, but that was something that was very important to us in understanding an approach that it was, to some extent, a target validation. When I say target, I mean that sleep, a therapy that would target sleep, might be, particularly the disturbed sleep of fibromyalgia, might become a therapeutic for fibromyalgia. So those were important things that led to us on our journey.
I was actually part of some of the early sodium oxybate research at OHSU, and I was really impressed with some of the benefits that I saw in folks. And it was pretty devastating to the community, really, at that time that it was not approved, or they didn't decide to go forward. But what I kind of tell people is what I learned from that is how important addressing sleep is in fibromyalgia. So that's one of the key things that I work on with folks when I'm treating them in the clinic. I know Sharon and I both, we work for ourselves on sleep management and addressing sleep, because that's just such a key piece of it. Can you let us know, how is the medication TNX-102 sublingual, how is it different than cyclobenzaprine or Flexeril, which people might know that name?
Sure. So cyclobenzaprine as a swallowed oral tablet, an immediate release tablet, has been approved since 1977 as a short-term treatment for muscle spasm. And that's, the FDA label is 2 to 3 weeks of treatment. But actually working with some of the leaders in the field in those early days, cyclobenzaprine as Flexeril was one of the first drugs ever studied in fibromyalgia. And there's an important paper, Carrette, Carrette, from 1994, that was a 6-month, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled study of cyclobenzaprine at night. And Corrette was a very important paper because it showed two things. It showed that cyclobenzaprine at night in its swallowed form had benefits at 1 month, and particularly a benefit in pain. But it also showed that after 1 month, from month 2 to 6, there was no benefit. And that was something, I think, obviously the sponsor of the program decided not to develop Flexeril as a treatment for fibromyalgia based on that study. It's a pretty definitive study, double-blind, randomized, placebo-controlled study. But I looked at that as, let's call it, glass is half full. Glass is half empty, you would say it doesn't work. Glass is half full is, wait a second, this had a benefit at 1 month. And it was given at night. And cyclobenzaprine has a lot of safety information about it and whatnot. So our whole strategy at Tonix has been, how can we make this treatment that has benefits at 1 month, how can we make something that would provide a durable benefit? So it took a lot of thought, a lot of pharmacology, reformulation, a lot of things went into it. But we believe that what differentiates TNX-102 SL from swallowed cyclobenzaprine is that durable benefit. That in our studies, in 2 phase 3 studies, we have statistically significant improvement in pain after 3 months of therapy.
Which is huge.
It is huge. Yeah.
And FDA, somewhat arbitrarily, but FDA regards 3 months as the criteria for a treatment for a chronic condition. So, a 1 month treatment for a chronic condition is not meaningful. And I think that's a very reasonable, standard. So, we pursued, the modern standard of 3 month studies, and we found this durable benefit. So let me tell you the thing that I believe is and this is how we designed it and led to this conclusion, led to our conviction to pursue this for 15 years, is that we believe that the limitation of oral cyclobenzaprine is a metabolite called norcyclobenzaprine. Now, when Merck developed Flexeril way back in 1970s, and it was approved in 77, and it was a short-term medicine, the standards were much lower. I don't even think norcyclobenzaprine is mentioned in their regulatory documents. And, it wasn't considered. There are even papers where they say, yeah, we see a little bit of this in cases of overdose. But using modern methods, when we looked at it, we realized that actually, if someone takes oral cyclobenzaprine daily over a period of time, norcyclobenzaprine accumulates, and it actually, the level of norcyclobenzaprine exceeds the level of cyclobenzaprine. And for some pharmacological reasons, we believe that norcyclobenzaprine blunts the effect of cyclobenzaprine on the relevant receptors. And also we think that it has potentially more activating, so may interfere with the idea of targeting the non-restorative sleep. So what we did was the sublingual product that we've developed called TNX-102 SL, because the medicine is absorbed directly into the bloodstream, under the mouth, it bypasses first pass hepatic metabolism, has a much reduced level of norcyclobenzaprine, and at day 20, so it doesn't really matter for chronic medicine what's your pharmacokinetics with 1 dose. So looking at day 20 dosing, which is called steady state, because the pharmacokinetic experts told us day 20 is a good model for what it would be, year 1, year 2, of taking a medicine all the time. So at day 20, we have, with our formulation, the cyclobenzaprine in the bloodstream peaks above the norcyclobenzaprine and goes down during the so-called sleep hours. So we think that that is really the difference. Now, one of the other problems about working in a chronic condition with fibromyalgia is each one of these studies takes 2 years, costs more than $10 million.
Right.
This isn't like an animal experiment where you can say, oh, let's get another cage of mice or something and find out, so I am putting together things that, it's just my belief, but that is how we designed it to reduce the norcyclobenzaprine levels. And that's how, and that's the data that we got from these trials. We don't have head-to-head data, but I can tell you, if you look at Corette, oral cyclobenzaprine does not work. And if you look at our studies in 2 phase 3 studies, we have statistically significant benefit on pain reduction, in two studies. So it was designed that way. We achieved the goal of our design. And, I think that supports the idea that the norcyclobenzaprine is really interfering with the therapeutic benefit, that Corette saw after a month and that we get for more sustained times.
That makes sense, actually. It makes sense. And maybe people would have less side effects. I remember some of my patients would have some morning grogginess with 10 milligrams of cyclobenzaprine at night. And I feel like 2.5, under the tongue, it's going to be absorbed more quickly. You skip that liver metabolism, and then it's going to be hopefully out of your system maybe more quickly. Or I can just kind of chemically, that makes a lot of sense why it would make a difference.
And so if I'm
Thank you. We agree. By the way, our product is 2.8 milligram tablets, but
Okay.
but it's 2 weeks and then a forced titration after 2 weeks to go to 5.6. So the long-term dose is 5.6. But one of the things, Ginevra, to follow up on your thing is, I used to be a rheumatologist,
You still are.
That's right.
a rheumatologist. I mean, but I do find that when people try to use oral cyclobenzaprine, two things. First of all, they often tell patients to take it an hour before bedtime or take it after dinner or something like that. But I find I often hear people saying that they wind up, they see the effect petering out and they chase the dose with higher and higher doses. And, and I think that that's when you start getting into these, potentially side effects. But the side effects in our studies, it was well tolerated. And we had about 3% in the last study, we had about 3% somnolence, about 3% headache versus like 1.5% in placebo in both categories. So a well-tolerated medicine. And we did not see the side effects that are normally associated with higher doses of oral cyclobenzaprine, like dry mouth, dry eye, drowsiness, and the rest of it. So again, it's a complicated condition. All I can say is, we designed it this way, and this is what we saw, but we believe we met our design objectives.
And so as someone here in the room without the heavy science background, just to make sure I'm understanding this correctly, then it sounds like what you're saying, if perhaps you're hearing this as a person with fibro and you've tried the cyclobenzaprine and whatever your reaction might have been, good, bad with that, it sounds like trying this, fingers crossed, when it gets approved, would be worth it. Like it is something different. It's not the same thing as retrying cyclobenzaprine.
Yeah, that's our view. Our view is that oral cyclobenzaprine was studied in Corette, even at higher doses, and again, it was an important motivation for us to pursue this. But I don't think that I think there's no evidence that cyclobenzaprine as an oral swallow drug provides a durable benefit. And, and that was really the goal of our program, was to try to address its deficiencies. So yes, I certainly hope that doctors and patients will consider this. And if doctors think it's appropriate for patients with fibromyalgia, I hope they would try our medicine once approved.
And we will link to all these studies that you mentioned in the description below. And we also will link to some of the Tonix studies if you want to let us know which ones might be good for people who want to geek out on the science a little bit more with me. And also just to kind of make sure people are staying up to date on the science.
Sure, I'd be happy to help you with links. Our first phase 3 study has been published. Our most recent phase 3 study is still in the process of working its way through the editorial process.
Got it.
Terrific. We'll add that in. So I just wanted to thank you again for people listening to this show. You guys all know we're talking about Fibromyalgia Awareness Day, and I really want to thank you, Seth, for having Tonix come on board as the official sponsor for this year's Fibromyalgia Awareness Day and help us raise awareness both here in the United States and abroad. We have a lot of listeners from all around the world. So I'm just curious, what motivated you to come on board and be a sponsor of Fibromyalgia Awareness Day?
Well, I said I've been involved in the fibromyalgia community as a physician, and then, in this drug development thing for more than 25 years. So I love what you're doing. I love I think that we need to really build this community. After all that's gone into bringing fibromyalgia to this point, I think that we have to build together. We have to build on this awareness. And I think it's a tragedy that it's still the case that many people have fibromyalgia for 10 years before they're diagnosed.
Yeah.
I mean, the discrepancy, the epidemiology is that, 10 million American adults. And then when we've looked at different, ways of trying to assess the market, and there's even published literature that probably only 3 million are diagnosed or treated. And that's a huge gap. I think that there's an increasing recognition of how chronic pain leads to opiate use, chronic opiate use, and addiction and the side effects of that. We commissioned a study on claims data. And if you speak to prescribers, incredibly unusual for a prescriber to say, yes, I use opiates for fibromyalgia. Some of them do, and they say, in a rare patient, if they can tolerate it, it's completely off-label, completely and I don't think it's good practice. But when we looked at American claims data, 18 months after a fibromyalgia diagnosis, more than half the patients were prescribed chronic opiates, hydrocodone, oxycodone, and tramadol. And actually, there was more prescriptions for chronic opiates than there were for all three of the FDA-approved products combined.
Wow, that blows my mind.
That does, yeah.
It's not a healthy sign in the system,
No.
And I think that the only way to block this or to try to right the ship is to make people aware of this, because I think there's a lot of awareness now that we should maybe stop introducing opiates at all to people. But
Right.
I think that opiates have a legitimate medical value for a molar extraction or a post-surgery, whatever, in appropriate patients, whatever. But I really believe that there is no role for opiates in chronic illnesses, in chronic disease, so-called non-cancer pain, but certainly for fibromyalgia. I mean, I just don't. And I think that that's something where we hope to work with. I'll work with anyone who wants to know about mentally. But I think that that's one of the reasons why people have to understand that fibromyalgia is something that can be diagnosed affirmatively, appropriately treated with one of the FDA-approved medications, and other things. I mean, I'm a huge advocate of sleep hygiene, exercise when appropriate and tolerable, and and other things. Even CBT, whatever. I believe in a multimodal approach, and what we're doing, I think, hopefully can just become part of a multimodal, multidisciplinary regimen.
Absolutely.
It really sounds like that. And, we do that here a lot on the show. My background being a national board certified health and wellness coach. We're in Ginevra, and both of our personal experiences with all these lifestyle medicine aspects that come into daily management of fibromyalgia, and many of those are what we try to get out here on the show. And so knowing that, potentially this medication is going to help people with sleep is such an important part of that, and it'll be moving forward, like you say, that would be one piece of the management strategy, and then combining it with other things hopefully will make a huge difference in the lives of many people. So thank you for being here. Before, we kept you a little over, so apologize. Is there anything that we didn't cover that you had hoped we would?
No, I want to thank you both for your interest in what I'm doing and what we're doing as a team. I have a wonderful team at Tonix,
You really do.
Also, as we discussed, just the diagnosis of fibromyalgia can be very liberating, because people that are living with this alone, not knowing what it is, waiting till they find something. And I think that once someone is diagnosed with fibromyalgia, then they can access all of these tools and help, and even know where to look for help.
Absolutely.
I think that that's why, advocacy, public awareness, and, your show, Fibromyalgia Awareness Day, these things are all really important, because I really feel that with all the science and all the, advances in care and other modalities that are available, it all starts with the diagnosis. And people can't diagnose themselves. They have to learn about it, and they have to, find out how to do it. So I really think that awareness and advocacy is critical, and I really applaud what you do, and we're happy to be supporters.
We're delighted to have you as a partner.
And we are so happy to have you come and enlighten us a little bit about this potential new tool that could be added to the fibromyalgia toolkit.
So don't miss the 24th Annual Fibromyalgia Awareness Day. It's happening on May 10th, a virtual live event from 2 to 4 p.m. Eastern Daylight Savings Time. And it's going to be on Zoom. Join us for an inspirational and informative event featuring two experts in the field, Dr. Daniel Claw, who's the director of the Chronic Pain and Fatigue Research Center at the University of Michigan, that was mentioned in today's show. And also our very own Ginevra Lipton will be one of the speakers too. And I'll be there as well. And a big shout out and thanks to Tonix for being an official sponsor of the event, as well as the Fibro Show. For ticket information, more details, please go to managefibro.org. That will be in the show notes. Thanks for joining us today. Many thanks again to you, Seth, and your team, and sending Fibro love out to everybody who's watching. Take care.